This conference will now be recorded.
Here, I'll move to screen number 2. We're happy to see we got people still joining. So if you see that barcode on the right-hand side with the arrow next to it, if you hold your phone over that, that's going to take you to the Illinois Freedom Alliance webpage, and it'll take you directly to the recorded previous recorded sessions page for you. So if you take that down, save that link, if there's anyone along the way that wants to join but didn't join last week, or maybe they want to join next week, you can share this with them and they can watch the earlier recordings. We'll have this week's that we're recording right now up there hopefully by tomorrow. It takes a little bit to save it, and you know, now that we're all set up here, it should be pretty easy in the future to do that. As it relates to just our process, everybody was really, I just thought last week went great in terms of us all just being respectful. I didn't know what to expect, so I had a timer, and I had, you know, we were asking people to raise their hand. If you can't find that tool on your either your app or your laptop device, please just shoot a comment if you want to speak, just so we can keep track of who's next. There were a few times we had a number of people that wanted to share, and I just want to be conscientious and kind and courteous to everyone and give everybody a chance to speak. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it in terms of housekeeping stuff. We did get some good feedback. So after each, you know, we're going to follow the questions that General Flynn and Boone Cutler set out for us, but then at the end of each chapter, we'll kind of leave it open for discussion, and that way if anyone wants to share additional content or ideas or thoughts that are beyond the book or the questions, please feel free to do so at that time. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments to share as we kind of proceed here, any feedback that wasn't shared already previously. We're really open to it. This is new, and we want to encourage as many people as possible to participate in this opportunity and some of the future content that we'll share down the road, or the books or articles and documents that we decide to read, and kind of share our thoughts together on those documents. Along the way here, I know I sent a note. We hope to have one of the authors join us a little later for a few minutes. So keep your eyes peeled on the video conference, because I can't see everybody. So if somebody wants to raise their hand, if we see them join, let me know. That'd be great. All right.
And again, if any of you are having trouble getting through, just put in a chat. I'm monitoring the chat as well.
So is Ken. We're kind of all just keeping an eye on it. Also, just want to note, Illinois Freedom Alliance is the sponsor, and that's the website where all of the links and any content pertaining to the Freedom Reading Hall Book Club will be posted in the future. All right, let's jump into chapter 4. The title of that chapter was Know Your Physical and Cognitive Environment. So the first question presented was, what sources are cited in this guide, and have you researched them? And so we felt like throwing an example out there, because this was kind of, you know, getting into some pretty heavy details here, but that Human Factors Consideration of Undergrounds and Insurgencies by U.S. Army Special Ops, that was one of the examples. And it was something done by Special Operations Command and the Johns Hopkins University Physics Lab National Security Analysis. Somebody has their speaker on, not sure. There we go. Okay, great. So I don't know if anybody has some, you know, ideas or thoughts, or has dug in a little bit into researching some of the sources beyond this book regarding the subject. Any thoughts? Michelle, you want to get the conversation started, or Ken? I know Ken dug a little bit on the Human Factors Consideration of Undergrounds and Insurgencies. It's obviously U.S. Army Special Ops article. So. No.
You just turned your mic off. So I didn't actually read this particular article, but I think the important thing to mention here is that, and we'll talk about it a bit more throughout the day today, is the idea here, it's clear as we read through the book and get the message that General Flynn and Boone Cutler are sharing is, the fifth generation warfare, it's a big thing and it's difficult to get your arms around. So they're trying to sort of lay the groundwork to help us understand. And there's a lot of references to additional reading. There's that whole clock inside the front cover that gives us multimedia things to take a look at. The forward gives us a reference to another book. This chapter in particular gave us a lot of references to outside material, be it white papers or publications from different organizations. And the idea is to take, the information that we're getting from the book and sort of developing a new way of looking at the information that we find, and then going out and looking at these things that are referenced, or getting the other books and reading them as well, watching the movies and sort of looking at them, even if they're movies that, some of the movies in that clock of QR codes are very old movies. So some of us may have seen them already, but Jody and I have done this a number of times where we can kind of look at what's going on right now in the world and go, man, things are really screwy. And I remember this movie, like Truman Show would be a good example, where you go, that it's interesting. I watched the movie, very entertaining, Jim Carrey, all that stuff. But if I reflect on it now, in the context of what we're living through, and I'm feeling like so much of the world is actually created, so much of our experience in life is created for us, that I can go back and rewatch that movie with a new set of eyes and have a different experience. And not that movie in particular, but there's been a number of things that Jody and I have gone back and watched again, realizing that when we do, it's going to be a different experience. So all of that kind of comes into play. The idea isn't just read this book and then toss it to the side. It's accept the message and see the references and go out and do some more digging. And I think even some of the questions we review today talk about, go out into the world and find examples of this thing. So, I think that was the whole point here in this question. Terry has her hand up. So, Terry, did you want to add something to that? You have to unmute yourself if you're talking. I don't see you on my screen right now.
I did.
Okay.
Just a minute.
There you are. You're all set. We can hear you now.
Okay. So I watched this movie called The Lives of Others. My husband and I watched it, and it was recommended by Bannon. And while I was reading this chapter 4 and the sources and stuff, I was thinking of that, especially when I saw the chart at the beginning, at the end of chapter 3 going into 4. Well, no, it was 3:3 actually, where it talks about how to make people kill people. And basically, the movie The Lives of Others, they were encouraged to squeal on each other and report each other into the authorities, and people would then get killed. And so that's one thing that came to mind, even though that's not listed in the book. It's one thing that came to mind while I was reading this.
Right. I think I have moments like that all the time now, particularly after reading this book, but in the last 2 years, as I kind of became aware that we were in this information war. I wasn't aware of it at the very beginning. I was like swept up by it, and I didn't understand what was happening to me on Twitter and Facebook and some of these social media accounts. But that movie, what was So the movie White Boy Rick, somebody made a comment in the section saying they watched it. We watched it right after our last call just to sort of catch up because it wasn't one we'd watched. And it does give you a new perspective certainly after you read this book and come to better terms with what's really happening, and a new pair of eyes. I mean, I feel like just about everything we should be going back and looking at and evaluating in a different way, especially anything that's been put out there, whether it's supposedly, I think White Boy Rick is based on a true story that is quite, you know, that I don't know who watched it and I don't want to spoil it, but it it kind of highlights our agents, it highlights the FBI, it highlights our legal system, it highlights kind of like the life of an informant who became kind of an informant through illegal, they were not doing legal things. And so it was really, I don't know, it just felt like it really gave me a new perspective of what's going on in the world. And honestly, take a look at, what's a life that I don't live, but someone else may be living and how that's impacted by it. Kara actually made a comment. So apparently there's more content out there on the real life Rick that story's based on, and it's really honestly a sad story, but it does show us our agencies and what's happening within that world. No one else on this one? All right, let's move on to the next question. And these are pretty generic questions at the end of this particular chapter. What information is available from scraping a social media account? So does anyone know the answer to this one?
So this was a little vague in the sense of the material that was actually in the chapter. They talk about it, but then they use this very specific term. So in case anybody on the call is not aware, scraping, there's tools out there that allow you to run a little app, and the term scraping means like you pull down all the available stuff from a particular external application. So there's tools out there that allow you to target Twitter accounts, or you could look for keywords in Twitter, and then once you find the keyword, they use the term scraping, where you collect the comments, whatever thread if you're doing a keyword search, it might grab the whole thread that includes your keyword and grabs the account information related to the people in that thread, which would be, whatever the stuff is that you put into your profile in that account. And so that information allows some of that, they talk about profiling people from social media in that effort. So scraping would be how you collect that information that they're talking about in the book. They don't exactly tie it together very well, but that's the stuff that you collect and the way they do it. So I do data architecture. So one of the companies that I work for is McDonald's, and so they use a service that actually does that for them, where there's a whole long list of keywords that includes, McDonald's and all of the things that you would buy at McDonald's, like Big Mac and fries and a shake and whatever. And so that service does this. They literally call it scraping service, where it pulls down messaging, and then they take that messaging and they run it through an application that does what they call sentiment analysis, so they can look at the comments that people are making. And this is, people talk about AI all the time. This is what AI actually is. So people talk about AI like taking over the world or taking over our minds. I don't believe that is a reality, But what an AI can do is something like this, where they teach it certain words that are, positive. And, if I say something like, man, I just went to the McDonald's in Geneva and I got the best service ever. And the person behind the counter was really upbeat and it was a great experience and my burger tastes great. And it was, what my fries were hot and salty just the way I like them, whatever. So I say that thing and the computer can look at what I said and decide that it was a positive comment or a negative comment and then begin processing from there so that it can essentially develop a list of people on Twitter who are posting positive comments and posting negative comments about McDonald's just by analyzing the text that they post instead of like making them go through surveys. So all of those processes are possible. And then in the book, Flynn talks about how you could, capture a group who's like all about Second Amendment rights or something like that and develop essentially zero in on a target audience, bringing us back to terminologies from the book. Does anybody else have something to share? Somebody raise their hand. Hold on, let me see who raised their hand. Rochelle. Rochelle, you want to share something more?
Yeah, so we use this at my work too. And I mean, I do it to identify potential donors. Obviously, like my job is fundraising. So I I'll, I have an outside company who like we've done the research and we know that like, hey, if somebody gives to St. Jude's, they're 1% likely to give to us. And if they give to ASPC, they're 7% likely to give to us. And here are people who are like overlapping donors with your organization and this organization. And, even though we have nothing in common, it's just something about the personality types or the mindsets that overlap. And so when we're doing our marketing and our direct mail campaigns and things like this is a big part of what we do in terms of targeting, because obviously sending out mailers by zip code at 80 cents a mailer is just insane these days. So I was a little concerned about him talking about the mass scrapings and how that gets done, because I was like, oh, are we part of the problem using companies like this in our marketing and for what we do? Like, are we part of this whole problem, or is this a tool that we just all need to be better at using and more aware of and using in the Republican world or something too? Because I don't know, like it's something that we use and it's very helpful. And at the same time, I now feel like, this can also be really evil. And I'm not sure that I like that this exists.
Right. So do you mind sharing where you work, or is it at least like, is it politically affiliated or?
No. I work for nonprofits. So I work for Samaritan's Purse, Boy Scouts of America.
Okay.
So just large Boy Scouts of America is who I mostly do this with. And yeah, I mean, it's just a large nonprofit, but we've got to rely on donors. And this is how we identify potential donors.
Okay. So I think my take on the input is I think more about awareness than necessarily deciding this effort is good or bad. So, certainly.
But now my newsletters can go out to these people unsolicited, or, I can put letters in their mailers and in their homes. I can send stuff to them because I can target like, hey, I know that this person gives to ASBC, and so they're likely to also care about this and give to that. And I can bombard them now with marketing and information. And I know over a certain amount of time and X dollars spent that I will get them to donate, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, if we're doing this from a political aspect to people, or if we're trying to convince them of something else other than like, hey, this is a good cause to give to, like, this is actually kind of dangerous.
Right. It
Right.
can be. So
I think
think
there's
that's
a
what
few
we need to
people
be
that
aware of.
have comments. Ken,
Right.
there's a bunch of
Right.
people.
Celicia, you wanted to make a comment. So just for the people who weren't here last time and for the people who were and had this problem, we're doing the raising the hand thing, but if you're using the desktop app instead of the web app, you don't have a raise your hand thing. So if you don't have a raise your hand thing in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, just put a comment in the chat saying you'd like to, participate in the conversation, and we'll call on you. So Celicia was next.
She has a comment. I just saw a comment.
Oh, okay. Oh, no, Mike. So it says, let's see, remember reading 1984 and the control was very overt and intrusive. In the actual way it's coming out, they have a carrot. Might be waiting on an extension of that. But yeah, I do think, speaking to the idea that in 1984,
Right.
the control was
Okay.
very overt, I think we're experiencing very covert control methods now. So Terry, you had your hand up?
Yeah, is this the hashtag that they were talking about in the chapter? Is that what this is?
Right, right. They made the reference to people who did like hashtags that talked about gun rights or supporting fighting gun bans and so forth, and that would be how they would develop a you know target audience to then begin looking closer at that group of people.
Right, so this can be good or bad, right? Because I
Exactly.
remember it said something about people, they can gather Antifa people to one spot using this in a way, right?
Right.
Sure.
So,
Sure. I
And
think
they
John
have,
should
they
comment.
did do that.
Right.
They did do that, telling them to meet here, like when they would go to Wisconsin, or they were trying to tell them to meet in certain areas. And so they were trying to stop some of that from happening and shutting down social media so that they couldn't actually do that. But they were doing that on Facebook and on Twitter and telling them where to go. I think too, like even more simplistically, like think about, go back to Animal House, right? Do you remember the gal that they looked, so the guys in Animal House, they looked at the obituaries and they found a girl whose fiance had died, remember? And then the guys went to her and they were trying to get her to console her and get her to turn to them because they liked what she looked like. That's what this is about too. Going after those types of people who are vulnerable in situations. I mean, I tease one of my friends, like she is like the police department's worst nightmare. She's got everything on Facebook. I checked in here, I checked in there, pictures of all of the kids and grandkids, and like, so it's kind of being aware of some of that stuff and being careful so you're not taken advantage of on those types of things, and kind of keeping your family and some of your stuff close to your chest so that they don't really know everything that you're doing all the time and then can't come target you. So I think that's what some of this is about as well, is just being aware of that and what you're posting.
John, you got a comment? John T.
Yeah, hi everybody. Good to be back this week. Appreciate you hosting again. Yeah, I kind of think of what they're doing as data mining, and Ken was right in a sense. I agree with his comment that they're using information to influence a target audience without question. And I think of the use of that information a lot like money, right? So you can either do something good if you have the money, or you can do something evil if you have the money. And that information that you get from the data mining is equivalent to that, in my opinion. And I agree with Michelle too. You have to have some discretion when you're posting things. Perhaps not doing things in a regular pattern or opening yourself up to things. There's always that moment of pause I think people should take before they just randomly post something, or like you said, like your kids or pictures of your kids are constantly checking in, or those types of things. So yeah, I agree with a lot of what's being said, but the idea of the data mining and how that's used, I think, is really, I think, a big part of the picture here, in my opinion.
I agree. Tim, did you have a comment to add?
Yeah, thank you. So this reminds me of like years and years ago before the internet. I know companies that would have newspaper reading services where a company would just read newspapers and they would highlight and send like my boss stuff about things that were discussed that he might be interested in. This is just on steroids with the data mining. And my son-in-law was involved in a digital marketing company. He would not want any pictures of himself on Facebook. He would not want any mention of himself on Facebook. And I asked him why. I think I knew why. his answer was, I've seen what's going on behind the curtain, and I don't like it. And it really bothers me when people put so much personal information like on Facebook, and we're seeing that it's being used, right? So many people just give their information freely. I don't know if there's any avoiding it. I try to be more careful about what I share and when I share what I share online, but it's really something. So I think this I'm sorry, the scraping I think is just a tool, and it's how's it going to be used? It's going to be used with integrity or non-integrity. It's going to be used against me or help me. It's just a tool that we all need to be aware of. Thank
Well,
you.
sure. I think too, the scraping, I mean, you got to kind of watch what you're putting out there politically, right? They want us to be fearful of that, and they could use that against you eventually, depending on who is in charge at that time, you know? But again, trying not to be fearful in all of this, but just know what you're posting. Make sure you guys are muted. We're getting some feedback. So anyway, I know that you had a couple other questions on this as well.
Fred had his hand up.
Thank you, Ken, for the description about scraping a social media account. I didn't know what that was until you described that. But what is really scary about this is I have no social media presence whatsoever. I've never had a Facebook or any of these accounts, and pretty much everything I purchase is by cash. And I've been taking a course on how to be a committee chairperson, and you can click on people's names in your target audience. And I clicked on mine, see if you want to go target to vote. And there's an amazing amount of information about me, and it's all correct. I don't know how they get this stuff, and especially when you're me and you try to stay off the radar, I can assure you, you're on the radar.
That's right. We got a lot of good comments in the thread. If people just want to take a look at them, the one that is particularly creepy to me too, I think it was Celicia who made the comment about going to Walmart. Oh no, it's Kira going to Walmart, and Walmart has a system in place where they begin talking to your phone whether you want them to or not. They identify that you're there, and they start pushing sales ads to your phone, so you get alerts on your phone about sales that are happening in Walmart just because you're standing in their building.
Right.
So it's that kind of stuff where technology is being used in a way. We walk around with our phones like our life would end if we didn't have it, and all of that has been a part of this cyber. They're building that dependency on purpose so that we never go anywhere without it. So they always know where we are, and they can talk to us however they'd like, and they can shut us off whenever they want.
Right.
I want to add a
I'm gonna
comment.
interrupt things real quick. So General Flynn actually just joined us. So I don't know if you can maybe stop sharing the screen and then he can pop out and we can put him front and center on there. General Flynn, welcome and thank you for joining us. Is he there?
I stopped sharing, so
Okay.
if he is.
So he said he can hear us, but he can't talk. So
Is he joining by phone?
let me see. He's calling me. Hold on.
Okay.
Hello. Is your camera able to come on or no?
There, he's been made the presenter.
So your mic you're unmuted right now. Nope, we can't hear you on here. Yeah, absolutely, I can. Are you able to put your camera on or no? Okay. Okay.
His mic's off now. It went from on to off.
Yeah, he said for some reason he can't connect his audio or video, but I'm just gonna put the phone up there so he can join the chat. Hold on one sec.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Do you have a session ID or name for this thing?
Do we have a name for it?
Yeah.
Well, it's Freedom Reading Hall is what we called it initially, and that's where the emails come from.
Uh-huh. There's
So-
usually a ID for these type of go-to meetings.
So I think it's in the email that was sent. Did you get that email?
I have one here. I have a phone number and I have the link, but it's not
Let's see.
taking to where you're at.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Can people hear me? Through your
We
phone?
can't hear you.
Yes,
We
we
can't
can
hear
Yeah,
hear,
you.
we can
hear
hear
you.
you very well.
About that. Let's try this. Just be patient for 1 second because I want to try to get into where I can actually be part of this thing.
Make sure it's the link with 456 at the end of it. So we have a separate link for each meeting.
Didn't you guys say you sent a second link earlier tonight?
Yeah, that's the only link that he has is the 456.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Right.
Hold on.
He's figuring it out.
I think.
Okay, I think I got it.
We can hear you through there now. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
I am in.
Oh,
Yes,
Hey,
you
there
are.
you go.
Okay, hang up, Michelle, on your phone. All right, that's good. I'm not getting feedback. Okay, can just somebody give me a thumbs up?
We got you.
You're good. We can hear you
Somebody's
well.
trying to share. Somebody's trying to share.
Shouldn't be anymore. Might be you.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
You have been dismissed. I just got booted out.
No, you're in. The other
you're
you
in.
got
That
put.
was your other phone, or you had two connections.
Yeah, you're still in. We can see you and we can hear you.
Okay. All right, that's better. Okay, now that we're through all the gymnastics, the electronic gymnastics here. Jeez.
Exactly.
So first of all, I really, really, I think it's admirable what you all are all doing, and I think that as we go forward, these are actually the kind of things. I just got off of a back and forth with a friend of mine, and we're trying to set up. Part of it is because it's just a kind of a neat place to go, but we're trying to set up an event for what we call all these sort of digital influencers, which this whole thing is about. So fifth generation warfare and, the book and all. And I don't know if you've all had a chance to to get it and read it or whatever. And honestly, that's Mox Nix to me. What I really want to be able to do is take a little bit of time and maybe I'll answer a few questions. I don't know how you want to run that, Michelle, but I'm fine to answer a few questions for those, from the folks that are here. But
Sure.
we
Bring
have
a little bit. Oh, I just
Huh?
want to let you, we met last week. So we did chapters 1, 2, and 3 last
Okay.
week. And this week is
Okay.
4, 5, and 6.
Okay. And my partner in crime, Boone Cutler, he's actually on another event tonight doing something very similar with another group in another part of the country. So the nice thing is that people are forming in ways that they have never formed before in this country, and we have access to what I call digital influencers, right? And I call them indies, actually indies, like independents, and they're independent podcasters. And we actually have access to about 150 to 200 of them that have a reach probably somewhere between 150 and 300 million people, given the time of year and the subject matter. Some of them have daily shows. Some of them have every couple of a couple of days a week. Some of them have once a week shows, and they all range in audiences from about 75,000 to literally millions. Some of the bigger names, obviously, I don't know, if many of you have heard of like Mel K as an example. She's terrific. And, Mel K has probably got a quarter of a century in Hollywood. She really, really understands what it is that we're up against. So I just use her as an example. Tracy Beans is another, Doug Billings, Ann Vanderstill. Those are just some of the names out there of some of the people. And those four right there represent about, they probably touch on them, in a 30-day period of time, they probably touch somewhere between 30 and 50 million people. Just those few. And Clay Clark, of course, is a good friend of mine. So I'm telling you sort of that framework because when you talk about fifth generation warfare and the components of what you have already studied and what you are studying, number one, we created this book really from a conversation that Boone and I had, and I was standing there talking to him about something totally different, and he was writing down some thoughts, and he had crafted some ideas about his time in the military as a psychological operations soldier, non-commissioned officer operating out of Sadr City in Iraq. So we were sharing some war stories and talking, and he had this document. I started reading it, and I'm like, wow. So I said, let me take a look at this for a couple of days, and I did. And with writing styles and my own background, so we decided we were going to take on this endeavor. And this started about probably last summer. And to write a book, of any magnitude, if you, some of you may have written a book, but one of the things I learned, if you're going to write a book, you have to spend at least 15 minutes a day writing. Some days you just sit down and you write for like 2 or 3 hours, but you don't spend at least 15 minutes a day, even if you're just staring at a computer, to get to where you want to be. And also these days, because of the cancel culture, a lot of it has to be self-published. Amazon's already booted us off. We had a backup in Barnes and Noble. They booted us off, and then they got back to us literally within a 24-hour period of time because they said, hey, there was such a demand that they made it a business decision, and frankly, that's fine. We'd have sold it off of websites or whatever, but that's what happens in the world that we're in. So I think where we are, and maybe for this week and where you guys are at, as we crafted this thing, we wanted to purposely design it for anybody that served in the military that's in this crowd. We purposely designed it like a military field manual. We always joke in the military, lowest common denominator for readability, but you'd be surprised at how many privates and corporals have masters and doctorates these days. And I ran into many of them, especially in the intelligence world. They just didn't want to be officers. They wanted to serve, but they didn't want to be an officer, and that's fine. And many with college degrees, master's degrees, a sprinkling here and there of somebody with a doctorate. So pretty amazing people that we run across. And so we designed the book. We designed it, as a military field manual. And so when you go through and I'll go through the in chapter 4, the homework break. So we created homework assignments because that's what military field manuals do, right? You want to teach the test because you want people to actually pass the test, and you want people to really understand it. So you not only want to ask them questions that cause them to think about what they read, but you also want to ask questions that cause them to think about something in the chapter, so they have to stop and they got to go back into the chapter, and maybe they start to highlight, they start to pin notes to it or tab the pages and all that kind of stuff, right? That's the beauty of a book like this. That's the beauty of what we're trying to do. And my goal with this is to take the idea of fifth generation warfare, which I'm very familiar with. It's it's like we talked about in chapter 1, where it's a combination of things. It's it's irregular, it's unrestricted, and for you all, in the late 90s, I was attending the United States Navy War College, and I actually had the chance to meet the 2 Chinese colonels who were brought over to the United States to do they kind of did a little tour amongst the military to brief the Chinese manual on unrestricted warfare, which you can find online, by the way. And the other book that we cite in this book, in the fifth generation book, is Chris Adamo's book on countering basically Saul Alinsky's rules. And I talked to Chris, who's a terrific guy. I've never met him, actually. We've spoken a bunch of times on the phone, and I read his book front, from cover to cover, while we were writing this book. And I have followed and read, Saul Alinsky and all of these communists, because we as an intelligence officer growing up, in the era of the Cold War, and then, all the things that I had to do, I had to study our enemies. So I got familiar with all sorts of adversaries and all sorts of ideologies, right? Not just radical Islam, and which was the latest, last 20 years of warfare fighting Al Qaeda and ISIS, but actually the rise of Marxism, socialism, communism, fascism, all the various ideologies that we face. So when you're looking at something like this, one of the things that and I just did this on a Twitter. I was on Twitter, and I get all these hate. I post a lot of stuff on Twitter. I just posted the Tom McDonald thing because I think it's such a great. Michelle, if you go to the QR codes, right, you can. That's how we set this up. So you can go to the QR code and you can actually download stuff, or you can see other things that we are posting, and that's just to keep people in the loop. But the idea is to inform citizens about the war that we are in, and this is World War III. So World War III right now, as it stands, consists of the biggest component is this mass psychosis and this very strategic psychological operation. But we also have a chemical war going on. We have a biological war going on, and we have a physical sort of combination of third and fourth generation, because this is the first time in my life, other than maybe as a kid in the 60s, paying very close attention to what was happening to the country at the time, where we were talking about the use of nuclear weapons. And so that's really fourth generation war. So there's these combination of things coming together, but they're all encompassed by this framework of fifth generation warfare. It's what we really talked about in chapter 1. So all of that said, the other thing that I just will, and I'll stop after I talk a little bit about this, and then open it up for any questions, and I'll just kind of go by hands, I guess, because I think I can see most of your names. I'm getting ready to talk to, in about 2 weeks, to the St. Thomas More Society, which is a gigantic Catholic organization, and I'm a Catholic, and I don't know why they asked me, because I think that they, I'm a fallback, and that's fine. Because I'm very I have actually, in my first book, Field of Fight, I took on the Catholic Church partially because the Catholic Church tried to protect priests using canon law here in the United States of America. And one very courageous judge up in the city of Boston in a federal court said, sorry, Rome, this is the United States of America. If you're in Rome, you can use canon law, but here in the United States, we use something called the Constitution. And they found from that, the consequence of that was that they found some priests guilty of pedophilia with children. So, and that's another component of my life that I take on. So I'm going to go talk to this group. It's probably about 1,000 people. It's going to be in a really nice setting at the Mar-a-Lago, and one of these black tie affairs. And I'm going to sit there or stand there. I'm going to talk to them about evil. Not going to talk to them about, and try to fire them up with some rosy picture of what is happening. I'm going to talk to them about evil and the fact that evil exists here on earth, and that there is a spiritual component to everything. I mean, most people don't know the largest voting bloc in this country are Christians. Inside of that Christian voting bloc are Catholics. Catholics roughly go 50-50 left and right. About 50%, I think it's like 47% of Catholics still vote for the Democratic Party. 85% of members of Congress, both the House and the Senate, about 85% of them call themselves Christian. So the narrative and the piece that we're facing really, and where you're at, in these chapters, when you talk about, the idea of like in chapter 5, it talks about hybrid warfare, lawfare, those components. In chapter 4, in a way we broke it down by sections, how they recruit people, right? I mean, how they go about doing the things that they're doing. Knowing, like when we say knowing your physical and cognitive environment. I mean, all these things are about trying to teach people that in essence, your neighbor is not your enemy. Your family member is not your enemy. We do have adversaries in this regard. We do have enemies in this regard. And if for those that may be listening to me for the first time or not have heard me talk on various podcasts and stuff, what most people don't have a clue how much the Chinese government has infiltrated every institution of the United States of America for the better part of a generation and a half. And they've been doing it, with basically because we've allowed them. We've almost welcomed them, and they've taken advantage of it. And 9/11. So where did this war start and where does it end? And it's been going on for many, many decades. It won't end until something dramatic changes, and I don't know what that is yet. I don't know what that is. As Karl von Clausewitz, anybody that studied military theories or military history would know Karl von Clausewitz. Clausewitz is a very famous military theoretician. He wrote the book On War, and it's a really difficult book to read. I've probably read it about a dozen times, and I've got a couple of different copies of it tabbed. And he coined the term the fog of war. And so the fog, from my perspective, is very, very thick when I try to look out over the next few years. It's very thick because the American people are starting to stand up to everything going on. It's not just an active book club and reading. It's also people activating. I caught, before I got unscrewed here with my own computer system, I caught somebody talking about precinct volunteers and poll watchers and all that stuff. I think you were talking about some of that, and I joined my own county. I joined my own county Republican executive committee, and my wife and I both volunteered to be poll watchers and poll greeters and such. Just it's all volunteer stuff, right? Everybody has got to figure out how to do that. So I see some of the comments. You're right. Peter Navarro wrote a great book on that references China. Michael Pillsbury wrote a terrific book on China. It's a couple of years old now. That's another one worth as you guys go forward, Michelle, and whoever organizes this whole thing. There's some really, I would really start to really hone in on China. Russia is a failing country. I mean, the notion that Russia, the one thing that does exist, this is the narrative, right? The narrative is that Russia is the boogeyman. Well, as I look at this audience, maybe, I don't see anybody's face, but the faces I can see, remember the Cold War, right? I mean, those ages, everybody except for probably Michelle and some of the ladies that I can see. But, the Cold War, we spent trillions of dollars facing the Soviet Union and building things for 40 years. And when that went away, we were supposed to have the peace dividend, for those that remember that, right? Peace dividend didn't happen. And that's because why does the unelected bureaucracy of Washington, D.C. want peace when billions and billions of dollars annually are at stake to continue to flow into their pockets? Okay. So let's just say from 1990 right up until now, there's a reason why there's so much fuel being poured into Ukraine and Russia, and it's because the billions and billions and billions of dollars that pour into a very small segment of our government on an annual basis, not over the last 30 or 40 years, but on an annual basis. And when that happens, you just can't give it up, right? If these components of our government and other institutions outside of our government, they're not going to give that up. China stepped out of the third world only in this last decade. Okay, only in this last decade did they step out of the third world. They grew rapidly, and they stepped out of the third world because our country allowed them access to the World Bank back around, basically around 2012. So let me stop there. And I don't know how you guys, I don't know whether there's hands raised or what have you, but I'll answer any questions. I have 7:55 here Eastern time, and I can hang out for a little bit. I'd like to be able to answer some questions. So I don't know how you want to do it, Michelle.
Okay. Well, I guess we can, if anybody wants to just go ahead and ask the question as opposed to it being in the chat, let's go ahead and start with that. So, Kira, did you want to ask a question or a statement?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
Celicia, I think, had some things in the chat as well.
Her microphone's not working though, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well,
Let me see if I can see the chat. If I
That
can
was
see
me.
the chat, 'cause
I'd like to ask you a question. General Flynn, what is your advice if we do choose to engage in digital warfare ourselves? So whether it's on mostly Twitter, I would say, and maybe along the way we realize maybe that's friendly fire. I don't know, I don't know, but something kind of comes to light. How do we, do you have any advice for us in terms of, because we realize we're helping wake up others that may not be awake in that engagement, and then realize, oh wait, they're trying to help the cause,
Yeah, I think that you're already engaged. You're already a digital warrior. The fact that you're here, and if you have a social media account, I think before I was able to, fix my stuff, I think I heard somebody say I don't have any accounts on anything, and I mean, okay, yeah, that's fine, and that's a person's prerogative, but I think these days, I don't know how you are able to stay informed. I mean, I maybe I'm a fanatic, an information fanatic, because that's my training and that's my background. But if you're reading even online newspapers, you're doing a disservice to yourself because the level of biasness, even in papers like the Wall Street Journal. I used to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. I started doing it when I was in college as a business major in undergrad. So we got a free subscription, and then you had to pay for it. You got to college. Wall Street Journal, especially the editorial board, is so far left, it's unbelievable, with a very, very few exceptions. And then, of course, the ownership is really Murdoch. So never mind Bloomberg and all these others. So how you're being informed. If you're reading a lot of books, that's good. I think that's good. But everybody is a digital warrior now. Everybody, because the fact that you're on here means you have a laptop or a computer and you got one of these, right? Little phone, probably. You can't operate without it. I have one of my degrees is I have a master's in telecommunications because my original training in the military was electronic warfare. I spent 10 years going through and I consider myself an expert in electronic warfare, which is essentially, they call it cyber today. But everybody's a digital warrior. You have to decide, the kinds of things you post. When because I get a lot of hate mail, and but I also get a lot of death threats, which I have to be very careful of. But the hate mail that I get, I've been able to learn about when somebody has 50,000 tweets, let's say, or 37,000 tweets, but they have 132 followers. So somebody that has that many tweets, that would be called, being trolled is one thing. I've trolled people. Hell, I troll Elon Musk all the time. But somebody who I have a whole body of people that troll me, and they get paid for it. So for example, I know that there are people who will say really nasty things about me. So this is the warfare part, right? To me, in my various social media platforms, they'll say really, really nasty things, threaten me. They'll go to the edge of, and I've had to report them to local, to my local sheriff, because I don't even bother going to the FBI anymore. But what I know is that there are a body of people, for people like me, for high profile people like me, they get paid if I block them. They get paid if I respond to their nasty comments. So they get paid for that. Okay. So that's become a business for people who are after Mike Flynn, right? And there is a body of people that do that, and because there's an ungodly, and I mean that very literally, there's an ungodly amount of money on the left that will try to disparage, ruin your integrity, your reputation. I mean, I'm so far past that nonsense. You define yourself if you're really, really, and maturity has nothing to do with age, folks. Okay, so because some of you are a little bit, about my age, maturity has nothing to do with age. You define yourself. I've always defined myself. I've always been the way I am from the time that I can remember. And everybody, the true friends that I have as kids, when I was a kid, they would say, "Yep, Flinny's always been like that." So, but I do know that they exist. So these adversarial warriors, digital warriors, do exist out there. So I fight them back the way in my own way. But one of the things that I do is I try to, from my perspective and my platform, I try to organize people. I try to organize the independent podcasters that I just mentioned. So where you can at your local level, maybe you try to organize. I mean, we've created a Facebook group, even though Facebook is enemy ground, it's enemy territory. We created a Facebook group here in my local community, and we've created a couple of activist groups here that do local things, because these are people that live here in our community, and they fight for the school boards, they fight for the county commissioners, they fight for the local sheriff, they fight for the election commissioners. And so we have these different groups, and they're very strong, and they get the word out, right? They get the message out. And what they've done, and I'm not really great at it, but I'm trying to get better at it, is some of these people who are really good about jumping on and doing videos, very honest, very authentic, very hard-hitting videos, because you have an expertise in your local area, or you know something about some issue that just popped up, that is some new zoning regulation, or something about the Second Amendment, or something about the First Amendment. And they get on there, they post the video, they put it on the chat room, and the people that are there that know about it, and then the one that I'm familiar with here, we have like 100,000 people on that. And it's run by a young woman. She's terrific. She's married, got a couple of kids. She puts her kids on the school bus every morning, and she goes to town. And what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to help her monetize it, if we can, because it can help her, give her some some people that that she can advertise. You can advertise, beef jerky made in the U.S. or something, right? Or, I mean, everybody's selling Mike Lindell's pillows, but that's helpful because, that incentive helps people like that, because we do need people to do that, and it takes time, it takes resources, and then she also has to take the time to prepare mentally when she goes on there, because she has to study the issue in this case, and it can be anything from a new zoning issue to a Second Amendment issue that's popping up, or some other series of crimes that were just committed in our hometown, right? It's that important. That's how you fight back. I would, and I'll stop here with this, but you have to decide what you can control. If you can't control Congress, and most of you can't, then don't try. Don't bother. Doesn't mean you can't send a nasty email to your congressional member, but if you don't know them, if you don't have direct access, what do you control in your life? How do you control your environment where you're at? That's what we're trying to say in this book. Part of that is to really understand what it is that you control, and then take control, right? And the things that you can't control, it's not that you don't worry about them, but you don't lose sleep over those. I don't lose sleep over what Joe Biden is going to say tomorrow or today. Christ, if I did, I'd lose my mind.
You'd never sleep.
Yeah. So anyway, okay. I hope that helps a little bit.
John T had a question. I don't know if you've got time for another.
I do. I sure do. I have a little bit. I'm gonna go till about 8:15. I'll try to make the next couple answers shorter.
Great.
I have a quick question too.
Great. Oh,
Hey, John. Yeah, John, you want to ask?
sorry. Yeah, I will. Thank you very much. General Flynn, first of all, thank you very much for your dedication and your service to our fabulous country. We so appreciate that, and for this outstanding book that you've written and given us something to talk about and fight for. Just wanted to revert back to something you mentioned earlier with regards to the Chinese infiltration in our institutions now for decades. You'd made the comment that it will not end essentially until something significant takes place. And I was curious as to, based on your experience and your expertise, what would you say are 2, maybe 3 of those types of events that you would foresee taking place that would make that change?
Yeah, well,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, and that's a great question, and this is a difficult question, because it's like, what are the scenarios, right? And I would love to have you all in a room and just whiteboard out, scenarios like to this question. When we talk about World War III, I say we're in the middle of World War III now, and so, but how much worse can World War III get? Can we go to nuclear weapons? And I'll tell you, the answer is yes. We can go to nuclear weapons, and that's that's a different dimension for the world, because we've never been there. So that would be an unprecedented move. And then who is the antagonist and who's the protagonist in the story, right? There was a reason why John F. Kennedy was assassinated as president. There was a reason why his brother was assassinated. It had nothing to do with Russia and what the narrative was, right? The assassination of John F. Kennedy, for most of, for some of you maybe, actually the phrase conspiracy theory came out of the Kennedy assassination, and it was created by the CIA. Okay, so I mentioned John F. Kennedy like I'll mention Dwight D. Eisenhower, and both were Democrats, right? And I would just say that the advent of a president of the United States that understands the dimensions of the full range of power of the president of the United States of America. Okay, because when we talk about, and maybe one of these books you'll read, talk about the branches of government, we have 3 equal branches of government, as we talk about, kinda, sorta, but there's only one president of the United States. During the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, who he ran 8 or 9 times for office and never won, and then he runs for president. And Abraham Lincoln, during the first 2 years of the war, and actually as the war was getting into the sort of the second half, he was having a lot of problems with a lot of different people in government. I mean, talk about, getting beat up across in the head and shoulders. And he ended up arresting a lot of people. He put people in jail, like he put an entire state legislature in jail. He put the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in jail. He imprisoned these people. I think it was he imprisoned a governor, and these weren't people down in the South because they were down in the South. These were people, in the North who were in a way, maybe you could say, well, they were at the edge of committing treason during a time of war, and Abraham Lincoln wanted their support, and he threw out habeas corpus and he took extreme measures because the president of the United States has extraordinary authority. So there's three equal branches of government, so to speak, but the president of the United States has a executive authority, just like states. States and states governors the states actually have more power according to our Constitution than the federal government, but they don't apply it. They don't apply it. States governors are weak. They all have ambition to become president, and so they all want to. None of them want to do. None of them want to demonstrate the courage that they actually could demonstrate because they have the constitutional duty actually, and they have the constitutional authority to be able to do that. So part of what I'm saying is, to answer your question, is extraordinary leadership is what we need, and we need extraordinary leadership. I think I used to introduce Trump to 25,000 people in the first campaign, as the most. And honestly, I would be up the mic. I would be the guy that would introduce him to damn near every rally that he had. After all the other, beauty queens walked across the stage, doing something, I'd get up there and I introduce him as the most imperfect person you're going to elect as the next president. And the crowds would go nuts because the American people, there's another book called Wisdom of the Crowd. Wisdom of the Crowd. It's written back in the 90s. You don't have to do a book club on it, but go read it. And people in this country have a better fingertip feel because they use and they apply common sense. And so people know. And so right now, this moment in history, that's who we have. That's who we have. Because Trump learned a lot of lessons. I was with him last Monday. He learned a lot of lessons in his first 4 years about the government and about how deep the corruption is. And so given another opportunity, he would do things a little bit different. He would still be an economic president, which is what he was, but he would do things a lot different. And I'm the first guy that should be able to say, screw Trump, and look at what he did to me. He fired me after 3 weeks and talked smack about me for some period of time until they started to realize, hell, these guys are trying to get me out of office, and they had to get me first. I'm talking about Trump. And now we know what we know. It's incredible the amount of corruption that's in our Department of Justice and our FBI. But anyway, so extraordinary leadership. We need, there may be a cataclysmic event. I hope that there's not. I pray that there's not, what I talked about up front. Because what we have running our country right now is not going to do the trick. And we are going to fall into an abyss that is so deep that we may not be able to get out of it. And we are, I tell people that if anybody's very, spiritual, you go read Psalm 23, because I've lived Psalm 23. And, yea, that I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. And I believe truly that thou art, that's really the key word, the key phrase, thou art. That means you, it means God Almighty. And I believe that. And so I was able to come out of that valley and see light. And instead of most people come out of the valley and they're either lost or they go to the darkness. And but for me, I was lucky. So, and blessed. But this entire country, so for the metaphor or the analogy, I don't know which is which, is where America is. The entirety of America is in Psalm 23, is living in Psalm 23. We are all walking, this country is walking through this valley, this dark valley, and we're trying to find the light. And And a lot of people just they're waiting for somebody to hand them something. So anyway, I'll take one more question.
Connie, I think you were next.
Connie, volume. You're muted. Unmute yourself.
I am
Pretty
muted. I
good
tried to unmute the
lips.
wrong person. General Flynn, I pray for you and all the other frontline warriors every single day. I want you to know that. Morning
Thank
prayers.
you. Thank you.
And my question, really, there's a lot of them, but the ones that's pressing is the Ukraine. I'm of the belief that yes, Russian is no angel, but Ukraine is as dirty as it can get, and they're just washing a lot of our money there.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to that, or what is the truth of the Ukraine?
Okay, so let me do two things. I'm going to answer one question that I just saw pop up on chat that says, "What does a failed America look like if we fail as a country, fall as a country? What is it? What happens?" I want to answer that too. So Ukraine is and was and still is, and it really, according to our State Department for years, is the number one money laundering, human trafficking, weapon smuggling, and drug smuggling nations on the planet. Okay, on the planet, and they are designated, and maybe our State Department. I haven't seen them pull it yet, but maybe our State Department has pulled them off the most corrupt country, in the world, right? And here we have our worst Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. I mean, he is the worst Secretary of State in the history of this country, bar none. We've had some bad ones, but Anthony Blinken talking about bringing the Ukraine into NATO is inviting. He's inviting World War III. Okay, there was an agreement, a treaty by it's called the Budapest Accords in 1994, where you had Margaret Thatcher, President Bush, Mitterrand at the time in Germany, and Gorbachev met and wrote down and signed a treaty. Signed it. The United States signed it, and not a policy paper, but a treaty, which carries a great weight. The Budapest Accord Treaty, and 1994, and in it they basically said we will no longer encroach on the Russian borders. Okay, and that was 1994. So we have totally violated that treaty. The United States of America, frankly, under the Clinton administration, Bush's were no better. They were horrible, actually. I briefed Rumsfeld a couple of times, and what a pain in the ass he was. But so Ukraine still has all that stuff, and yet here we are. We're pouring lots of money into it. I don't think you were up, because I think you just popped in maybe, and I may be mistaken, but I was talking about why is Russia so important to the United States of America deep state. Okay, and it's because of gigantic sums of money that's money that's unfathomable, unimaginable to most people. But the other key aspects of Ukraine that's very true is the biolabs, right? The biolabs, because Ukraine is a no man's land and it's totally corrupt. You pay people off, you can have these biolabs in there, and they're not, and that was one of the things that Putin, decided to go after, because the funny thing about biological weapons, like we've learned about, the COVID vaccines, not COVID. COVID is a curable flu-like symptom, right? 99.98% recoverable. The vaccines, on the other hand, are not. That's a biological weapon, done in a gain of function research, which means creating a weapon. And so, now I want to jump, but this is tied to this answer to, what does a failed America look like? Well, this year we're gonna experience two things. One of those is a financial transition, and the second is a health transition that, like the latest G20 that down in Bali, Indonesia, back in early December, all the nations of the G20, except for one, Russia, signed off on a global vaccination card. Okay, and I don't know if there's any Canadians on here, but the Canadians are already moving to it. So we're going to have a global vaccination card. And what does that mean? Now that means that, you may not be able to travel, right? You may not be able to go anywhere. You may not even be able to buy anything unless you get vaccinated, according to, and in some cases, some countries are, countries are democracies, but they're not constitutional republics like we are. So this health adjustment, this health transition is one. The second thing is this financial transition. We might see a collapse of the economy and a movement to, and write this down because you need to go read about it. It's called Executive Order 14067. Executive Order 14067. And that's the executive order on central bank digital currencies. And this government, our government, signed off on it on 8 March. It went into effect on 13 December. They're already doing a public-private beta test, and it's been in play for about 3 months. We probably got about another 3 months for it to continue to go through testing. And then they're going to move to eliminating the US dollar as the fiat currency. That's the goal. So the failure of America starts to look like the failure of our financial system, where you have control over your money and the government has control over your money, or you have control over your health care, where now the government will have control over your health care. Lastly, because I can't see everybody, but just a raise of hands. How many of those that I can see have ever heard the term 15-minute city? Okay, so a few of you. All right, good. That's actually good. That's helpful. 15-minute city, there's a 100 15-minute cities being beta tested around the world today. And that's what failure looks like. Failure looks like when, tyranny takes over your freedom and my freedom, and we're not able to do these kinds of things. I mean, they'll allow us to do book clubs and from a remote location, and you can talk about certain books, but you better not talk about this book, because this book's going to try to help you get through this craziness, right? And the idea of really truly seeing what it is and who it is that we are up against, and how they're imposing their way of life and their decisions on us. And I haven't even mentioned the World Economic Forum yet, right? So now I throw that in there, and this new world order, and don't take my word for it. Go to the World Economic Forum website, and like I do when I can't sleep, because I grew up in the military studying our enemies, okay, and becoming a subject matter expert on the enemies of America. And they were usually ideologies. In some cases, they were just really radical people. But that's what I do. So when I can't sleep, I get up and I listen to podcasts, or I listen to speeches by people like Yuval Noah Harari or Herr Klaus Schwab, right? When he's talking about the fourth industrial revolution, which is really a carryover from the Third Reich. Okay. Now, some of you might know, most of you don't, and maybe you read it one time growing up. Adolf Hitler was Time magazine's Man of the Year in 1938. Okay, and we entered the war in 1941. So 3 years prior, Time magazine, which was it was an international magazine, but it was owned by an American corporation, made Adolf Hitler the Man of the Year and stuck his face on the cover of their magazine. That tells you everything you need to know about where we were at that moment in time. We were in a truly unbelievable place mentally, where nobody wanted to believe what was going on, and Hitler was a good guy, and he was a nationalist trying to take care of his countrymen, coming out of the depths of the 1929 depression and coming into the early 30s, and rising getting the economy of Germany going, and getting the people to believe in themselves again, right? All the while he had his agenda, and he had a bunch of, literally criminal thugs in his around him, and psychopaths. But yet here's the United States of America. Many corporations were working with the Germans, helping them, and funding their war effort, going to the east, right? And then all of a sudden he turns and he goes to the west, and and people that saw it said, hey, there's something wrong here, and of course you know, we make him Time Magazine Man of the Year. That's how stupid we can be sometimes. And I'll finish up by saying that because I'm still on this failed America and Ukraine, because we can lead ourselves to something that we cannot get ourselves out of. Okay. And so between Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong, just those four alone, you're talking somewhere in the range of about 100 to 150 million of their own citizens killed by them, of their own citizens killed by them. So Joe Stalin 60, Adolf Hitler, you're talking 20, maybe 25 million. Okay, of course the Holocaust, the numbers there are only like 6, but Hitler was responsible for a lot more than that. And guys like Pol Pot, he was up in the, they say 2 million, it's more like 10. Mao Zedong, he's on the platform up there with Joseph Stalin. Those are just 4. Never mind other dictators that have existed over time. And that's in the last 100 years. So that's not in the last 2 millenniums or since the time of Christ, or that's just in the last 100 years. I'm 64 years old, so I was born in 1958. Time magazine put Hitler on the magazine only 20 years prior to that. I mean, so that horizon is nothing. That time horizon of 100 years is nothing. So when we project ourselves going out forward, I actually can only see to probably the next couple of years. And frankly, if we don't have according to Yuval Noah Harari of the World Economic Forum, he says that the 2024 election, U.S. presidential election, will be the last U.S. presidential election the United States will have. He's the principal advisor to those members of the World Economic Forum. Principally, he's the advisor to Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, and one former president of ours, Barack Obama. So and you can throw George Soros in there, but George Soros is nothing compared to his younger sibling, his children, and they're far worse than him. So we're in a weird place, folks. And so I super appreciate having some time with you, probably much more than you wanted to hear. But and Melissa, Michelle, thank you so much for working through Melissa.
Thank you.
If there's something I can do in the future, with you all, please don't hesitate to reach out. You know how to get a hold of me.
I do have one thing for everyone to look at, though. Did anybody notice this on the spine of the book and what that symbol is?
Yeah.
So that is the Ghost Army from World War II.
Right.
And
That's right.
so we've done some of this stuff before, trying to get Hitler to believe that we had more military than we actually had, and we also used blow-up tanks, things like that, so that they were able to trick them into thinking that we had more guys available to take them out. So this isn't new stuff, but the fact that there's symbols on that symbol on this book, I was just wondering if anybody else had looked into that at all.
Symbology matters.
Yeah, and I do, General Flynn. So General Flynn came out to my church in September, and my son, who was in the military and did some intelligence, he was able to meet General Flynn and listen to him speak just like this in a forum. And he sent me a text message that I read, and then General Flynn asked me to send it to him. But I want to share this with you just from another military person's viewpoint. This is from my son to me. By far, out of all the people in this whole thing, including Trump, General Flynn is my favorite. Easily my favorite. He's down to earth. He's focused enough to not get caught in the weeds over what I think is silly, unimportant stuff. He's spot on with what he says, and he's been there, done that. He's fought wars with his own boots on the ground, behind closed doors, fighting for the welfare of his own troops, behind the scenes in our intelligence community against the worst of humanity, and fought a very public battle and won against the enemy here at home. He understands government and how the military and government function in a way most of us never will. But he's never lost his humanity in the process. At least that's how it looks from our viewpoint. on the outside. He could have walked away from all of this, could have stopped before it even started, and he would have been a general by now. Maybe even retired, enjoying his life with his family out of the public view, but his mission isn't over yet, sacrificing his retirement years to try to save a country from itself, one county of 50,000 at a time. It's incredible. Most of these other people are also in it to make a name for themselves and make money. And yeah, he does make some, but didn't the government strip him of a lot of his money during the process? Oh yeah, I love listening to him and watching him interact with everyone. He just seems like a really, really genuine person who enjoys what he does, but at the same time knows that he also needs to be at home with his wife and kids and grandkids. You can see it all over him. But not only enjoys, he truly believes, but is also very blunt about it. It's not one election, it's not one person. It's about changing the tone of our overall attitude as a country. It's about sticking up for what's right, no matter the cost. It's about holding our politicians accountable for turning their backs on us, but over time, repeatedly, forever. Not one election about one guy. It's not about the other fluff, about that one theory about devolution or whatever. It's not about whether or not DC is a foreign country, because to him, it doesn't matter. It's all about literally saving America one county at a time by coming together as a community.
No, it's awesome. It's amazing. I really I appreciate that. And I always tell people it only takes one. It only takes one person. Sometimes, you can talk to thousands of people, hundreds of people, whatever, but it only takes one to really make a difference. And and that's also on the negative side too. So,
Right.
well, thanks very much. Thanks everybody. And
Thank you for
really,
joining us.
really appreciate it. God bless you. Okay. See you.
For joining us, General.
All right. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank
See
you
ya.
so much.
Bye.
That was
Well, that was
That
fun.
was special.
awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Now what?
I'm gonna
Now
go
we go
back.
back to our
I'm gonna go
mundane
back
book
to
club.
the questions. Where am I at? I'm sharing my email. Hang on a second. But
So
maybe
going
we'll
back
go.
real quick to
Go
the
ahead.
Ghost Army, I just want to read this to you guys real quick. Ghost Army was the United States Army Tactical Deception Unit during World War II, officially known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. The 1,100-man unit was given a unique mission to deceive Hitler's forces and was given and mislead them as to the size and location of the Allied forces. And that's what's on the spine of this book, which I thought was very interesting. I didn't know if anybody else, did anybody else actually notice this or look at it?
No.
I didn't
I didn't notice it, but I watched that video of the Ghost in the Machine, and General Flynn, right before our meeting tonight, posted, what did he post? Something, the rapper.
It's funny because at 3:15, I sent him, and I sent this to Jody and Ken too, I found 5GW on YouTube, and every single one of those videos that's in the front of the book by the QR codes is in this YouTube link. So I sent it to General Flynn, and he posted it on Telegram, and then also on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if he was aware that that wasn't even out there, that they were all together in one YouTube compilation.
So that's a great, because it's a single YouTube site, that's a great opportunity for us to share with anyone we feel is engaging in this discussion and open or asking questions like, even a sign like, I have no idea what's going on right now. That was crazy, whatever, when they mention something like that balloon that recently happened or whatever, where they're searching for answers and they're showing signs that they're starting to wake up. That link's great because it has all of the content on it. And they can pick and choose what they want to watch. Some of the content, they open one of those music videos and it's a harsh or isn't their style. There's definitely a lot of options in that content they can scroll through. So I don't know,
Right.
why don't we, do we want
Terry
to
had
jump
her
back?
hand up.
Pardon me?
Terry had her hand up. I don't know if she wanted to share something in this conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to ask Michelle if she would share that YouTube with the reading group.
Yeah, I'm working on getting it. I'm getting it right now.
Where is the
thanks.
hand raising thing? I can't find it. I've looked all over.
Some of us don't have it.
Oh, okay.
I don't have it
Right.
on my laptop.
So how that
Super
works
random.
is,
So I do this.
no, it's not random. The way GoToMeeting works is there's on a computer, there's a desktop app or you can run just in like a web version. So the web version has the hand raisey thing, and for whatever reason, the desktop app, only the very newest version also does, but if you have the old one installed, it doesn't update itself. So some people just don't see it. But you
Okay.
can just put a note in the chat thread saying, you know, I'd like to add something, or however you want to put it, and we'll call on you.
Yeah, you got me the last time I asked my question. Thank you.
Do we want to jump in here? I mean, he kind of covered cyber warfare, but does anyone have any comments they want to share about cyber warfare as it relates to the book?
Or any examples?
I'd say it hasn't really begun yet.
Oh,
Oh,
really? No, it's
Yeah.
going.
It's
We haven't
going.
had
Huh?
any massive
Oh, yeah.
power outages. We haven't had
So-
any, we've had, you know, some small things like there was a pipeline shut down in the southeast last year. But we haven't had like a nationwide power shutdown or,
Right, we haven't, but I
Well,
think the term also applies to things like some of the stuff we were talking about with General Flynn, where you go online and you do something to expose the fact that you have conservative ideals, and you
yes,
just find yourself attacked by trolls and commenters who are just trying to make you look stupid. So
yeah.
that's
I don't
certainly
ever,
smaller.
I don't ever post anything, so that hasn't happened to me.
All right, well, you're lucky.
It's happened to me, and you can just say something in a comment, and it could seem pro conservative, and you think you're in a chat, and then somebody will come after you, and I will comment back that they're just gaslighting. They just go in, like when it comes to election fraud, for example, even in people who seem to think would be of the same maybe voter block as you, and they attack you, and that's how I know. And I'll say to people in the chat, this is called gaslighting, this is what this person is doing, and then they leave me alone. But it's so obvious. That's all I wanted to say.
Agreed. So both Jody and Michelle have posted the link to what I'm imagining is that YouTube consolidated.
Jinx, Jody.
Should we move on to the next question?
Yeah.
Can I say something
So
real
the
quick
next-
about the last question? I think like Elon Musk is exposing everything that's going on Twitter, and then you look at that, it expands out to all this other social stuff. That's cyber warfare, if you ask me.
Right, it is. And certainly what they were doing and doing with the platform was cyber warfare for sure.
Yeah, and not only that, but the stuff that they were actually keeping from us that's being exposed right now. They were labeling, Dr. Artis, Dr. Malone, Dr. McCullough as misinformation and disinformation. They changed their Wikipedia pages so it makes them look like they're goofy physicians when they're world-renowned physicians. I mean, Dr. McCullough was like the most published cardiologist, and they made him look like a fool because he's questioning the narrative that they're pushing. So that there is cyber warfare. I mean, I would even go so far as the balloon yesterday, right? So this whole balloon thing, I mean, if any of you ever looked into Project Bluebeam, how do we know that that wasn't a Project Bluebeam situation? We just don't know, you know what I mean? So just to kind of be aware of that kind of stuff that's out there.
Right. And stuff like that, I always ask myself when I see it, I'm like, right, John just said it, PSYOP, or it could be Project Bluebeam. But whenever I see something as sort of seemingly ridiculous as that in the news, I think, what is it they don't want us paying attention to right now?
Right.
Like, what is
Right.
really happening at the moment?
Yeah.
And for anybody who doesn't know what Project Bluebeam is, it's the idea of being able to project holographic images basically into the air so that it looks like something is there that's not. There's a relatively famous, or at least infamous, video of the White House, where, if anybody's familiar with the AOC political stunt, where she is dressed all in white with the squad near the border at a migrant detention center, and she's acting like she's bent over crying. Well, you see the image of her in that pose floating around the top of the Capitol dome because
Right.
it's being
That was
projected.
that was circulating like 2 years right after 2020. I just thought it was the strangest thing, but that was the first time I heard of Project Bluebeam. That was like
It's
2 to 3
demonstrating
years.
that technology.
Right. We even use it in the Chinese Olympics, you know, during their opening ceremonies. They were using Project Bluebeam, you know, and they had all of the, like the whales and stuff that were floating above. So, I mean, you can even just go to YouTube and look up Project Bluebeam and all kinds of videos will show up.
So let's keep going here. The next question is, do countries conduct political warfare against each other? If so, how? And I just want to share one thought. Like, it's so ridiculous. If you guys go on to IMDb and you take a look at this just speaks to other countries. So like the Ukraine, what's his name? The president of Ukraine. What's his name?
Zelensky.
Zelensky.
So this would be political warfare, or some kind of political, or not cyber warfare, but digital warfare. He has an IMDb, and he played the president on some sitcom prior to becoming the president. So that would be one of those things where I'm like, what is Ukraine trying to do here? And then circulating around the internet, it's hard to know what country the content's coming from, but a lot of negative and odd content about him that circulates. So is that Ukraine?
He was an actor before all of this came about. He was an actor and a dancer and did that show and that video where he's dancing in heels and black leather.
What I'm referring to. So it's like, what are we watching, and why is this being pushed upon the American people? You know, for what purpose, I guess. And I do think that's other countries potentially doing that. I also know if you look at Twitter, you can see kind of take a look at a person's followers to find out if they're actually demonstrating some kind of digital warfare against us by the followers that they have in their country of origin or language of origin. Just sort of my own.
Jody, for me, that information on Zelensky is what raised the flag. Like, who is this? Where did he come from? That's why my guard against the Ukraine. You know how all the Americans are waving the flag and wearing the pin and crying for I feel for the Ukrainian people, of course, but seeing all that stuff early on Zelensky is what made me aware this is more than what they're telling us it is, you know?
Yeah, I think the stuff on Zelensky came from somebody on our side to expose that this clown was put in place by the Obama administration.
Yeah.
The Obama administration in 2014 effectively caused the Orange Revolution in Ukraine to replace the existing president with Zelensky. And, you know, maybe even part of that was putting Zelensky there so that Trump would make that phone call. Even, I mean, it could go that far. I think that it exposed Zelensky as a clown. And then, you know, after that, we've seen the videos of him snorting cocaine and rubbing his nose, and he's, you know, in the beginning he was wearing the shirts with the Azov Brigade on his shirt. I think that was kind of from our side, and trying to expose to the American people that this guy is not what you're being told he is, and Ukraine is not what you're being told it is. You know, I observed everything from the beginning. It seemed to me that if the Russians wanted to really annex the far eastern part of Ukraine, why did they start dropping bombs in the western part of Ukraine? And why did they go into Ukraine in the western part of Ukraine and around Kiev? Because they went to the biolabs first.
Right. There was a map overlay where if you overlaid where the bombings were, they were everywhere that there was a biolab.
Right, and they were not on the biolabs. They were around the biolabs to knock down the potential for them being able to go in and get control of them. And the same thing with Chernobyl for the nuclear materials. And there's this giant nuclear plant to the south of Kiev that they also got control of. And they've maintained control of these facilities and these areas since the beginning. And so, you know, I never thought that this was any kind of, you know, conquering army coming in. I always thought it was, you know, trying to get control of these significant dangers to the Russian people.
Today I read that the Ukrainians are starting to conscript 16-year-olds.
They're starting to do what?
Get 16-year-olds into the army, conscript them into the service. 16-year-olds. There's a
That's
video of
not
a woman
surprising.
screaming in the background saying, "You can't do this, this is illegal." And there's an army guy and a cop, and there's 2 young kids. They're starting to have 16-year-olds going to the army.
So again, though, think about what you're being shown, right? Is that real? Or is that just what they're telling us?
I
You know
know
what I'm
that
saying?
over there. You know, you're right. You're absolutely correct. And it's
Yeah.
going to
Right.
is what we believe, what we see with AI. But
Right.
Right. And right. So I agree with you, Connie. Let's try to jump on to the next question just so we can get through the chapters before running out of time. Does anyone have anything to contribute on the whole Chinese political warfare, the PLA's information influence operations? Anyone bother to take a look at that?
I know that at one point they went into the to an offices in Washington State of Google, and they found a door that said what was it, information engineering or opinion engineering, and inside they found 12 guys who were Chinese officers in the Chinese military.
Good
But yeah,
Lord.
they're doing it. Believe me, they're doing it.
Well, opinion engineering sort of tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it?
They were writing the algorithms that were controlling what we were seeing on Facebook before people realized that these things were going on. I didn't realize these things were going on until I saw Twitter cancel the New York Post story on Hunter Biden's laptop.
Right.
Then it was like a shock. I said, how can this be happening? How can no one else be looking at this? How come there aren't thousands of investigative reporters bringing this story to the front of the news? And that's how it happened. That was the sort of the exposure. I think that was such a great big event that they had to expose that they've been doing all this all along.
All right. So if anyone hasn't read it, there's an article on where that article just pointed to this Dr. John Lee, the Hudson Institute. There's a barcode there if you want to just grab that link and read that article at your leisure.
It's more of a white paper. He's with the Hudson Institute, and it looks like for at least a decade he's been writing for a variety of different organizations, political strategy white papers related to the U.S. and China.
I found it
So-
interesting. Flynn kind of kept bringing us back to China as the primary enemy of the United States in terms of some of the articles. So I think this is a worthy read for anyone that wants to learn more.
Jody, I think you watched Jovan Hunter Pulitzer, right? Yesterday and today he had a lot on China, really important stuff, and then he had a paper on it if you subscribe to his local that you can download. But he recommends that everybody really listen to yesterday's and today, all on China. And I have a number of other sources through the years that I've been watching. I'll send them to you.
Connie, can you post it like a couple links to Jovan's page for people that don't know who Jovan is? Obviously, we know who he is and been following him for over, gosh, he was one of the first people in December of 2020 that I just started following and listened to him on a fairly regular basis. So he's a great guy.
I found him after he spoke about the election steal in Atlanta. That's when I first came across him.
Right.
I'm getting his link.
He
You're muted,
testified
Jody.
right before Bobby, I think, that day too. I think I
He did.
watched.
He did. And you
Right.
know what?
Yeah.
People don't like him. People don't invite him on the talk shows and everything for whatever reason. I don't understand it, because what he's doing is he's teaching us things that make us smarter, where a lot of other people are talking heads giving their opinions. I've cut back substantially on listening to people's opinions, because if they're not really well grounded or well centered, it's just a lot of hot air and a waste of my time.
Right. Agreed.
So I don't know if anyone wants to share any more. I was so happy he joined us, General Flynn, and he talked a lot. So that was awesome to hear everything he had to say to us. So I don't want to skip through it, but at the same time, I do think he spoke to a lot of the things that were covered in 4, 5, and 6. Does anyone have any extra thoughts or feelings on hybrid warfare and what we're experiencing right now? And, like, for instance, I think of that balloon that we sort of saw this week is kind of that hybrid warfare element, right? Because we're not sure what it is. We don't know if it's even real. It's hovering over the United States. We're wondering why our president is not doing anything about it.
Jovan
Anyway,
covered that at length yesterday and today.
I
It was
I
fine.
was
It's not good.
I went regarding the balloon. I went and did my once a month shopping outing, and I saw a newspaper, and apparently the Chinese are threatening retaliation for shooting it down.
Right, after they
course.
said it was a weather balloon.
Yeah. Well, no, they said it was some kind of, there was some company, it sounded like there was a private company in China that did this balloon, and that the China is going to defend their company's right to do these things. And if that's true, if the Chinese are really squawking, I guess it must have been their balloon.
Right, but they said it was their balloon and it blew off course because of a jet stream. So how does that become their right to do that? They have to figure out what side of this
Hey.
argument they're on.
There are all kinds of
here's-
responses, and we all knew it was lies. Like the Democrats, if their lips are moving, they're lying.
I really
here's the
liked his point about how we've got to control what's in our sphere of influence, right? Like that he doesn't worry about what Biden is going to say tomorrow, because that's just a pointless worry to have. And I like that he participates locally in his, polls and stuff like that. And I feel like we got to be taking all of this information and applying it in our daily local lives, as more than just being like a precinct committeeman or a poll watcher, or, like Jody said, I mean, we're trying to wake people up around us, the best ways to do that. And I feel like you guys have a lot of great podcasts and links, and everybody's been piecing this puzzle together in their own way over the last couple of years. So it would be really helpful to me if we got like one email that just shared a bunch of this stuff that we could all kind of explore, because I've heard so many different things from many of you that I never heard before. And I'm like, oh, who's that? I want to go down that, I want to hear this podcast. I want to know this and I want to know that. And so that's just one thing that like locally this group has kind of done for me, is shared new information and new resources. Because you're right, there's a lot of deep fakes and we don't know who to trust, but we've all been discerning that in our personal lives over the last couple of years. So it'd be great if we could share more of that stuff.
I
think
agree.
though, too, like
Happy to
as
do
far as
that.
waking people up, I think we need to start waking up the lions and the lionesses. There are people out there who are in our camp who are still asleep. You know what I mean? We need to wake those people up. That's the thing that's frustrating is, you go to a school board meeting and all these people are up in arms about the mask, and you have all these people showing up about the mask. Now the mask thing is over and they all just disappear. Like nobody is concerned about the other stuff that's going on in the school. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's what's frustrating.
Nobody
No.
organized him and got names and said, okay, here's the latest. This is what we need to be on top of. We can't stop now that we have this momentum.
Right. And I shared with Ken just today, the idea, like Ken and I are whatever, our deep rabbit hole we went down and we've probably put 4,000 hours of our time, 3,000, 4,000 into just election fraud, election integrity, and what is going on in Illinois. But we show up to the stolen innocence, and we show up to the medical freedom, and we show up to all these other things. Just because we're interested in one particular area doesn't mean, we don't show up for the other stuff, or the open books event. That was really a fabulous speaking engagement that we got to, listen to. You got to show up for it all. I mean, you honestly do. If you're starting to stand up and participate, you may have your area that's a real focus, but don't limit it, because that's how we become these bigger, like Michelle said, be a lion, help others wake up. But Rochelle, I will put some of these other podcasters that we've discovered, and Mel K, somebody actually, Ken and I think, Michelle, you've met Mel K, and you have, Roger. So, there's some really great people, and Vandersteel, that General Flynn mentioned, that I'll be happy to include some of their links to their YouTubes or their Rumble accounts.
How many of you have not heard of Mel K? Just by show of hands.
I've heard of her, but I've not listened to her extensively. I've run across her stuff now and then when people put it out there.
Okay, I'm gonna put one on here from her, what she did at the Reawaken event in Nashville a couple weeks ago. It was phenomenal. It was one of her best that I've seen her do. She covered a lot of information in a short amount of time, so have a notepad and paper ready. How about Liz Crokin? Any of you heard of Liz Crokin?
I've heard it, but don't know her. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to post Liz Crokin too. She gives a good down and dirty about Pizzagate. So maybe look at Pizzagate. Has to do with a lot of stuff that General Flynn was speaking about with the child trafficking and the child trafficking at the highest levels of our country and the global elites. So post that too. How about Mike Smith and Out of Shadows? Anyone? No. All right. So I'm going to post.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Oh, it's Gina. You know who I've been starting to listen to? And he has a lot of good, actually, he did a really good one the other day about Arizona and tying it to Tennessee, and then a lot about sex trafficking. But Mike Jaco,
Yeah.
have you heard of him?
Yep. Yep.
He's really good. And it was scary the other day, how he was tying Maricopa County with all this stuff that they're trying to steal Tennessee and stuff. It's crazy. And then with the Super Bowl, that's probably going to be a really big day for sex trafficking and stuff.
Yeah, the Super Bowl is the largest sex trafficking day in the United States.
Yep.
I think a lot of people avoid that content because it's really difficult. I mean, if you go down that rabbit hole, it's probably the hardest. I mean, it's really the hardest one to process.
I agree, it's difficult, but somebody had said something to me too about that. And it might have been Mike Smith when I met him. He said, yes, it's difficult, but imagine being that child going through that. And if people aren't awake to what's going on and how horrible this is for these kids, it's never going to stop, because people have to be aware of what's really going on.
100%. Exactly. I agree. I'm just warning people as they go down it, and help and understand that some people just don't want to go down it because it's too hard. And I think we owe it to the children that have been trafficked to buckle up a little and come to understand what's really happening, because that's the biggest issue today.
Terry,
in terms of, yeah.
Terry, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a favor if you could put the links on the email that we all get. Is that possible?
Yep, definitely.
Because that'd be easier, then we can just copy and paste. I tried to copy on the chat thing and it doesn't work.
No problem.
And I just wanted to add, I used to watch Mike Jaco until he started having people on that bash General Flynn. So it's hard. It's like Flynn was saying, at some points, I have to disassociate myself when I get confused, and I had, it really is psychological warfare. And it's just crazy.
Another one that I've been listening to, that Dawn told me about, was David Nino Rodriguez.
Oh yeah, he's great. Yeah, he says the same thing.
He doesn't really express his own opinion too much, but he has a wide variety of people. And some of the stuff, some of these people sound nuts to me, but they have different things. As a matter of fact, the other night, night before last or last night, he had this guy who's was an ex-military guy who's has been doing the chasing down the pedophiles and getting the pedophiles captured. And that was a really good one. But he has a real wide variety. So you can see all the different things going by and you can decide for yourself which ones are the ones of value to you.
And he's a former heavyweight boxing champion.
Yeah. So
I think the nice thing about Nino too, Roger, is that he doesn't know a lot of this stuff. So he asks the questions that people watching are asking and thinking, right? So he's not fully aware of all of this stuff. So he does ask those questions that people are wondering, and he doesn't give his own opinion because I don't think he has the knowledge, you know, that a lot of these other podcasters have because of the research they've done. I think he's got a lot more knowledge now than he did the last couple of years since watching him. But he is truly like one of us trying to just learn what in the hell is going on, you know? And don't be fooled. I think a lot of these podcasters were put in place on purpose by the good people to disseminate this information, and that some of this disinformation has to happen, like with the Mike Jaco thing and General Flynn, okay? If any of you are following Lynn Wood on Telegram, like he's really bashing General Flynn, but I think a lot of that is done on purpose to try and get you to take a side and really figure out what's going on. Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? And see if you can figure it out and use your discernment.
So before we run out of time, does anyone have anything additional to add about the CCP as far as unrestricted warfare or, you know, the purpose of economic warfare? Does anybody have an opinion about some of the stuff we're subjected to, especially since January of 21 related economic warfare?
I just would add, I personally have someone in my life that after the 2020 election saw tons of CCP people coming into my home state through the universities, you know, as TAs, teaching assistants in record numbers because she handled the insurance, and just it was so upsetting. So it's real, you know.
I'm concerned about the financial as far as the money goes. I mean, if they're going to be trying to phase out the dollar as the currency, and then people are talking about, you know, crypto and blockchain and how do we protect ourselves from this? And should we go to gold and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, for the average person who, I mean, is on Social Security and retirement and disability, or is retired, or is just working I don't know, a minimum wage job at Dunkin' Donuts or Jewel or something. These are not real options for them. And I mean, as a parent, like, what would I tell my kid to do? And what do I tell my neighbors to do? And what do I tell the elderly people in my life to do? And what are the real world suggestions? And what are the kind of protections we got to take for ourselves? So that kind of interested me when he brought up that whole, the healthcare and the global forum being the two things we're going to see over the next 2 years. But then he put a 3-month timeline because he says it's already been in beta for 3 months and we're going to see more of this over the next 3 months. And it's like, that's not a long timeline for us to like wake up, learn this, and figure out a strategy.
Well, the point is for it to come on real fast.
Thought, remember, he's a general, and some of that might be information warfare as it relates to waking more people up, right, to this idea. So you're bringing up very valid points as to what's happening here, but look at the people, how much inflation has occurred in the last 2 years. The people are still walking around seemingly unaware, right, and okay with the inflation and okay with the gas prices. They say they're not okay, but they're still not paying attention. So I have to wonder that some of that isn't about, hey, people need to start paying closer attention and connect the dots to what
Jody,
right.
Jody, the problem is that people think we're back to normal. You have the Super Bowl happening. You have basketball running. We had wonderful holidays. The majority of people have gone back into their routines, affected by the economy, But in the large scheme of things, and this is all the keep them busy and bread and circuses stuff, you know, keep them occupied so that they don't have time to think and to do research, and trying to talk to people into watching a really strong video that has a lot of great information. You put it out there, and who knows if they watch it or not. But what I'm hearing is it's people like us. When someone raised the question, leaders are saying it's up to us to go out there and speak boldly to both sides, not only to the lions and lionesses that haven't woken up, but to the people who say they don't want to hear it. Some way, somehow putting something in front of them that impacts them to get their attention. And on the good side, it's that a lot more people have woken up than wouldn't be involved or be aware if the election had not been stolen. But it's our job to inform people.
One thing that one of the guys on Nino's Corner said was about the money is get your money out of a big bank. Don't use any of these national banks, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase. Try to find a credit union that has offices in 1 or 2 states, 3 states. These local banks, credit unions, small banks, because they're not going to be stealing your money like the big banks are going to do.
And that's what I mean. I can wake people up, but if I don't give them suggestions and actionable steps, it's just noise to them because they're like, well, what can I do? I can't do anything about that. Like these layoffs are real. I'm seeing more and more people laid off every day, and they're scared, and they believe something's wrong. They're aware something's wrong, but they just don't know what they can do about it.
Along with the big banks, if your investments are with any of the top 5 people, BlackRock and all those that they mentioned, get your money out of there. There are people, Vivek Ramaswamy, I think is his name, and Epoch TV has a documentary right now on all this, talking about how ESG is hell-bent on ESG and forget your returns. They're not looking to returns. And the Security and Exchange Commission has approved big pension plans and stuff to be able to invest in these things. So it's important for people who have any money invested to get out of these ESG investments, because their bottom line is equity and equality and all that nonsense, and not the return on your money.
And I was able to prove that to people this year because they lost like 20%. We're doing our taxes. Everyone's doing their taxes, and they got their principal accounts and whatever, and they lost 20%. And I was only down 2.3% for the year. And they're like, well, how come you did so well? And I'm like, because I've been trying to tell you guys, this is real. And when you see it in your finances, that makes it real to people. And then, that's what I mean. Actionable steps that I can show people and tell people is really where the difference comes.
So this meeting
The
is about
documentary is The Shadow State, and I recommend people watch it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say this book and the discussion is about information warfare and 5G warfare. So what we need to do is those people that need actionable steps, you also need to say, why is the TV and the president telling us that the job market's better? Why are they telling us that our economy is good when you know it isn't? So you have to be also pointing to the chaos and helping them understand, instead of just here's an actionable item you can do. Yeah, that helps them earn a little bit more money, but it isn't actually bringing them along into what's actually happening and why is it happening. I mean, I guess you could turn off the president, but then what's the actionable step next time? Do we sit there and be left confused at what's happening, or do we help them understand that there's propaganda coming out of our own current government and administration?
Right. We have to evangelize the truth, because if they don't see the reality of what's going on, they're not going to want the steps because they don't think anything has to be done. They need to understand first that we need to make change happen.
That's just my 2 cents, and sorry.
In my
inundated.
No,
sentiment,
that's exactly right. I mean, I agree completely. It's like I can try and wake people up and I show them these things and they're like, yeah, I know. You know, these layoffs are real. We lost 12% of our team this week, but people just kind of throw their hands up at it because they're like, but what can we do about it?
Not pretend that an election was stolen or wasn't stolen, I guess, would be the first step. Start asking questions why the president is telling us one thing or experiencing another. Maybe they're also telling us an election wasn't stolen when it was. So I guess that would be some of it as well, is understanding right now we don't have we're selecting candidates. So if we're selecting candidates, then what does that mean about everything else?
right, which is a good segue into our last question. You're on mute.
Is this the last question?
It is.
Okay. I'll be quiet.
All of it.
Right. So, speaking about the elections and the media and state and non-state actors, it's a perfect platform for that conversation. We had the news channels, the Associated Press, they're all non-state actors, but they're all toeing the line, calling elections when we're, just single digits of percentage of the vote is counted. We all know how in Arizona, they weren't even done voting. They hadn't even closed the polls yet, and Fox called Arizona for Joe Biden. So we have, those sorts of examples for non-state actors, and obviously now every governmental agency that you could name will step up and read from the card they already have in their pocket that talks about how this was the most secure election in the history of elections, and there's just an endless list of people who will just, deliver that matching statement. So, that's how the message works. I don't know how many people heard about it before Zucker was ejected from or retired from or whatever happened. But before he left CNN, Project Veritas had infiltrated what was essentially a daily meeting that Jeff Zucker, who was the CEO of CNN at the time, was leading, but it included representatives from all the major news stations, and they had a daily call where they discussed what the news of the day was going to be and rough talking points for each of those stories. So, that's how you end up seeing these YouTube videos where you see like
They're all saying the same thing.
right, it flips from one channel to the next, and you're seeing all these different newscasters literally repeating exactly the same line about a particular news story. That's how that stuff is happening.
Over and over every day.
Yep. They all
Every
have the
day.
same point of view, and that happened years ago, like when Obama was in office. But I do see that on Fox News, at least Tucker Carlson, I know he's not in New York anymore. I think he's in Montana. He's finally, talking about stuff, and Jesse Waters on there. I don't watch the shows, but I get the feed on Rumble. I mean, it's so pathetic. 5 minutes after these things air on Fox News, they're on YouTube. They must be hurting for subscribers. It's crazy.
Regarding Arizona, I did the analysis of the ballot counting. They knew that they were going to decide. They knew that what number they were going to use to certify. Within moments, before the counting was finished. On November 12th, they finished counting. They counted 1.973 million ballots, and they certified 2,089,000. They certified a number that had not been counted.
Right.
120,000 votes short of what they counted, or bigger than what they counted.
I want to share a little detail, and I'm trying to look for the link right now, but coming back to the 5G warfare and state actors and non-state actors. So this is a great example, and if somebody else can find the link, but if anyone's aware, there were a lot of upset people about our midterms. People upset about state and federal and state in Illinois, as well as local elections in Kane County. Interestingly enough, though, Kane somehow gave themselves an award or received some kind of an award for the, and kind of, you can find that link, but this is what I mean by information warfare. So we all have this experience and we feel gaslit by the whole experience by this award that they, and I can't remember, we dug on that one and come to find out they're sort of like the DNC is awarding itself in Kane County. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And you got to start digging and looking for answers, or you just sit there confused as to what's really happening. I don't know if you can find it, Ken, but it was a link.
I'm looking.
There's an article about it, and somebody showed it to me at one of the, you know, some meeting I went to, and I was like, once we looked at who the award giver was, I'm like, they're just making up awards that they give themselves to confuse us with the election fraud narrative. It's absurd. It's
Yep.
Anyway.
There are a couple of things happening now. Tina Peters in Colorado, her trial starts this week. If anybody wants to pay attention to that, because she could use all the moral support and prayer she can get. The other thing is that Dave Shestokas has started the case in Will County, where the county clerk got more votes than Pritzker in the governor's election. So that, and working with Edward, we have decoded that election. It was all planned from the beginning. They kept running the neural network until the county clerk and the sheriffs lost their race, because the county clerk and the sheriff would have investigated this election. They couldn't allow them to win. But both of those races, the down ballot races, got more votes than the governor's race. So that there's something to go on to get people to look at that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
And that's happened. That started last week. So,
hey, Roger, I want to add to that. We went to see Dave. We went to the first hearing. Ourselves and a number of patriots showed up. And you'll be glad to know that when Dave stepped out with the state's attorney, because Dave was challenging him on his ability to both represent her as the state's attorney as well as her private attorney. So apparently
yes.
There's some law that makes that not possible. And the state's attorney wasn't aware of it. And the judge asked him to step outside. So he steps outside, and there's probably about 20 people in the courtroom, almost as much as the courtroom would hold. And the judge says, is anyone here for any other hearings? And we all sat silent. And you should have seen the judge he jumped back when he literally realized that every person sitting in the courtroom was there to hear about that specific court case. And you know, it was a beautiful moment. And I have to say, this is why we have to stand up and why we have to show up, and we have to put them on notice that we the people care, and that we are here to make sure they're held accountable.
Yeah,
I was going to go to that, and Dave said, you know, it's just going to be a routine hearing. You don't need to come. So.
You know, there's a case too that nobody knows about in DuPage County. DM Mizaki is suing because in DuPage County, they're not properly verifying the mail-in ballot signatures properly. But I mean, I don't think anyone's talking about it. I know Illinois Freedom Alliance is helping her on that case. So there's one also in DuPage County.
That's great to know.
Well, let me tell you something, that not a single mail-in ballot signature was verified properly anywhere in the United States. So this is nothing unusual.
But we have fair and great elections, right? And we award our county clerks for how good they are. I mean, that's what we need to be continuing to evangelize. I just want everybody to be aware of this. If you put your phone up to this QR code, it'll take you to last week's session, and by tomorrow we'll have this week's session, which will obviously include General Flynn on that session. So I'll leave this up for anyone. I don't know if anyone wants to join us for, you know, we probably maybe spend another 15 minutes talking about the afterward. I just want to like conclude today so that if anyone has something they'd like to jump off for, that's great. If you want to continue, we're going to actually stop the recording here, and then Ken's going to move on to sharing some of the content from the clock that General Flynn shared.